Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Dark Pixel Podcast. My name is Mike.
My name's Landon.
My name's Kason.
And I'm Dreamcast Guy.
Dreamcast Guy's with us today.
That's your real name?
Well, my real name's Max, but anytime people call me that on Twitter and stuff, I'm like, whoa, what's going on?
It's like, who are you? Do I know you from high school?
Your identity.
Got to get your name legally changed to Dreamcast Guy.
Yeah, and then we'll call you Mr. Guy.
DCG here. How's it going?
DCG.
Thanks for joining us today. We have some great topics we're going to be discussing today. First of all, just this week, we had Secret of Mana revealed as a remake, a 3D remake that's coming to the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation Vita, and talk about our thoughts on that. We're going to talk about the fact that Bethesda might be working on a Game of Thrones game. There was a listing from Target that has been retracted as of today, but we'll get into that, whether or not we think that that's real or not. Topic number 3, Nintendo is going to be shutting down Miiverse in Japan on November 8th.
So soon.
It's pretty quick. And then we have the viewer-suggested topics. First one from Chocolate Rob asks, what changes would you make to a Final Fantasy VIII remake? Good question. Jarvis Mott asks, are games capable of expressing a main narrative conflict as man versus self? Do you know any games that are examples of man versus self? Okay. And then the last question is for our guest, Dreamcast Guy. How do you go about reviewing games? Do you think it's necessary to complete every game you review, or is it enough to just get a feeling for a game? Okay, so start out with the Secret of Mana remake. Were you guys as
holy crap
completely taken off guard as I was by that?
Lid on this.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's still. When I first heard the news, I was like, because I love the crap out of Secret of Mana. For the longest time, it was like the only multiplayer game we had on the Super Nintendo.
It was our first like RPG.
Yeah, and so that's that too. But I was like, okay, this is freaking BS if it's what I think it is. And then I looked at it; it's still the top down. It's still, feels like a Secret of Mana. I was kind of worried about a little more of a modern 3D approach.
Yeah. I'm glad they did it right.
Yeah,
they did it more the way that Link Between Worlds was to Link to the Past, right? Which I don't know. It seems really, really cool.
Yeah.
The art style reminds me so much of Adventure of Mana, which I beat last year, the remake of, and it looked the exact same. And I loved that because it was so faithful to the original. Like, same mechanics, exact same combat, same controls. They just really, really polished it up. And I'm hoping that's what this is.
How did you like that that remake of what was it? What did they call it? Adventure of Mana or
that was the phone one, right?
Yeah, and they brought it to Vita later, and I reviewed it when it was on Vita, and I really liked it.
So is it only on Vita and mobile devices, not on Steam or anything like that?
Yes, as far as I know. If it's somewhere else, I'm sure someone will correct me in the comments.
Speaking of, the Secret of Mana remake is on the Vita and the PS4, but not Switch. The Nintendo Switch.
Mm-hmm.
Don't blame them a ton. I would hope a Switch game is in the works if it's going to be on the Vita.
Mm-hmm.
I would hope that it would, easily be able to be put on the Switch. But either way, we have a PS4, so it's no big deal. We'll be playing it.
Well, I mean, and aside from that, like, Square Enix has talked about so much how enthusiastic they are about the Switch as a platform.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit of a surprise.
Final Fantasy 15 is coming to the Switch. Secret of Mana should make its way over.
Yeah. It could just be one of those things where they just haven't had time to make it. They're juggling so many Switch projects. I mean, normally you have a port team. You have somebody who's like making the head game, and then you'll have like a secondary team who's like putting it on each console. And they just could literally have every single Switch team is busy.
Totally. And this was a downside, and Nintendo had to have known this going in, and I think that's the reason why they released early in the year and are letting companies ramp up a little bit, around now, because no one knew what the Switch even was. I remember I think it was some Ubisoft or EA executive, I can't remember who it was, but they were talking about how somebody asked if they were going to be supporting the Nintendo NX as it was known last year, and he's like, we don't even know what it is. We can't. How could we support it?
They kept the giant lid on that. They were worried about people stealing the idea.
The idea of detachable,
which I don't know which idea they were really more concerned about: detachable controllers or the infrared camera thing. Because I don't know what. So people were rumoring
they're not even using that really. So.
No. I'll be interested.
It's like Nintendo shot themselves in the foot. Like the reason we're not seeing a lot of these Switch games now is because they didn't know what the Switch was until we knew what the Switch was, and that's not even a year. right? So yeah, the port teams for these companies are just working overtime trying to get these games done, and it's Nintendo's own fault for not letting them know what it was ahead of time. And hopefully that'll be rectified as we go forward, because the Switch is clearly selling well.
Yeah.
Yeah, what did you guys think of the trailer, though?
Colorful,
like I did not. Well, actually, that was the thing that one of the criticisms I have of its art style is that it looks so flat in comparison to the original game, like the contrast in colors and the vibrance.
You're
colors.
right. Yeah, the darks and lights aren't there, but
Yeah.
the colors are just crazy saturated. I think.
That's something that I've always had a problem with when games move from something that was in the 16-bit era with the pixel art and how rich that pixel art can be.
Yeah.
Moving into interpreting that in 3 dimensions. There's a quality that sometimes just doesn't come across because there's like a painterliness, a painterly quality to pixel art that is really, really hard to achieve, and sometimes that's
true. Yeah.
There's a richness or a depth there that, like, I don't know if it's memory constraints, trying to streamline things to work on really, really like not like all kinds of crap can work on the Vita, so they wouldn't really have to pair the game down too much for that. But
yeah.
A lot of games do this. They when they go to 3D, it's almost like they think they need to mimic the pixel art. They need to simplify the 3D, and the pixel art was suggesting a lot of detail,
right?
A ton of detail.
And in 3D, it's just not there. Yeah.
But it's like whose imagination are you tapping into for that, right? Like everyone was able to fill in the gaps a little bit, somewhat, and so. I don't know. And then how much are they following the current trends in the market to try to establish, like, oh, this is what people want right now. This is what people wanted then, but if we do that now, we're going to lose some sales. I don't know.
It was just the only thing that caught me off guard is they kind of have the exact same chibi body models as the Final Fantasy 15 mobile, and that kind of just surprised me. Like, I don't dislike it. It just, I don't know. Every time I think of 3D remakes now, I think of, like, let's see how real we can get, and, like, let's make different pieces of his armor and stuff. And instead, it's just like, hello, I am Bubble Man. Like,
well, I haven't played it, but in the game you reviewed, was the art style drastically different, Dreamcast guy?
Yeah. Well, just because, I mean, the original one was on the original Game Boy, and it looked super far out and pixely. This was just a lot more colorful, exact same map layout, brick for brick, but it had the same art style as this, but it was so zoomed out, and since it was isometric, you didn't really notice it. So if this gets too close with cutscenes, you may be a little more caught off guard.
Okay, yeah.
What did you guys think of the voice acting?
Well, see, you never know in a trailer whether or not. I mean, I would assume that's what the final product's going to be.
Coming
right?
out soon enough.
That's
probably.
true. It's pretty soon. I don't know. Square Enix can't help themselves with the voice acting. I prefer not to.
This is why I don't care if games
90% of the time. Yeah, but it's there, and that's fun. It's fun.
If it has an option to turn it off,
I hope it does.
I think that I would do that. Because especially for games that are remakes of, like, Super Nintendo games, and if you grew up playing it, it's like.
I know that
you were fine reading it before, you're fine reading it now, but it's just I mean, we've talked about this a lot on our podcast, that, like, if you're voice acting is something that can completely enrich. Voice acting is something that can absolutely enrich the game and make it way better than just reading text if it's done right. It's just that on something that's smaller budget, like this likely is, you often don't get, like, the best voice acting. A lot of times it can be grating to listen to, so hopefully they at least have the option to either switch to Japanese, which I actually saw the Japanese trailer first, and then I saw the English one, and I was like, oh, this is freaking sweet. And then I watched I don't know what it was. It wasn't that the voice acting itself was, like, bad necessarily. It's almost like it was just really loud in, like, the mix of like the music and everything. It was like the guy was right in my ear, like.
Yeah.
Anyways, hopefully they have time to kind of mix that a little better, but I don't know. I was not expecting it. Go ahead.
My initial thought here was, is this going to be the original version of Secret of Mana that was supposed to come to the Super Disc, the Super Nintendo Disc?
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because they had a game that was about twice as long as Secret of Mana as it presently exists, already made. Right, the game was almost done, and Nintendo couldn't secure a deal with the disc, and that fell through. And they had to, freaking delete half of it and fit it onto a Super NES cart, right?
Mhm.
So I was hoping, and I figured this is like an unreasonable hope, right? But my hope was, I hope that they remade the original game, the full thing that they had originally made back in 1991.
That would be sweet. If they were able to do that, that would be an instant buy for anybody who's a fan of that
That would
game.
be freaking cool, because as it stands, the end of that game, it breaks a little, right? It's a little weird. You can tell that they cut things.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. Is Secret of Mana going to be on the NES or the SNES Classic or not? Is that,
I think it was.
I don't think so.
It is.
It's not.
6
I
is.
can't remember what Square Enix.
What other Square games?
Final Fantasy.
And then Mario RPG.
Mario RPG, yeah. And that's the
like
only thing.
Chrono Trigger. Huh.
Well, they are actually. Isn't Square making a legend or secret a Mana like compilation?
Well, they
game
already did.
for the
It's
Switch?
out in Japan.
Oh,
It's just not.
it's like
localized.
$50 though, or something, right?
And
Yeah.
it's got all three of them together in one.
It has all
one game.
so all the Seiken Densetsu collection, but
Which is crazy. They released that, and then they released the remake that same year.
well that
Is
this
that
remake
kinda
will be
weird?
next year.
Oh, it's next year.
Yeah.
Is it
Yeah.
early next year?
It's
January.
February. Okay.
January.
Okay,
So
yeah.
within a year, I guess. Of
Yeah.
Each
That's why it surprised me so much that they're even doing it. It was like I
Yeah,
was
it's like,
figuring
didn't you
they had
just-
done that on the Switch and they had just
Yeah.
released that, and it was like, okay, maybe they can localize Seiken Densetsu 3 finally, and
I
just
think
bring
that's
that
the
game
only
over
reason
here.
we haven't gotten that was because
Oh, but dude,
they don't want to put the effort into localizing Seiken Densetsu.
right. What if Seiken Densetsu comes in as a remake the way Mana is coming in right now? If Mana sells well.
Screw that, man. We need to get the original one.
I know. What if? All right.
No, I could see it happening though. I mean, the fact that we are getting this one suggests that Adventure of Mana did pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, this
So,
came out of nowhere. I was
Yeah.
so stoked when I heard about this.
but yeah. Anyways, let us know what you guys think in the comments. Secret of Mana remake. Do you like the art style? Do you not like it? Are you stoked for it?
Or
What
is it another
platform do you want to see
senseless
it on?
remake? Did they ruin the integrity with these newfangled 3D visuals?
We'll hear all kinds of opinions, I'm sure. Okay, so this was a news story that broke out during the week. Bethesda was allegedly working on a Game of Thrones game. This is because Target listed it. A Game of Thrones video game from Bethesda. Where was this found? Does anybody know? Like,
Oh, there was
where-
the
I saw it
Forbes.
on Twitter. But
There was a Forbes article about it
Mm.
that I ran across initially, but
It was officially, I believe, Australia. It was Target Australia put up an
always
official.
Australia, man.
Yeah. I think their website's just more automated over there or something. They have less employees and stuff like that. It just goes
Okay,
up for
that's likely
pre-order.
true.
So Target has since retracted this, right? But does that mean for sure that this is fake or that it's not happening, or what do you guys think?
I still personally believe, I completely believe this is true. So much so, just
I
because
still do too.
we've heard Bethesda directly say, like, line in the sand state, like, we are going to make an Elder Scrolls 6, but we currently have 3 really big unnamed projects right now. So, and we know for a fact, we've heard rumors before that they've actually been approached several times early on by HBO.
You know, I want to know if this listing was not supposed. How and why did this listing get made in the first place?
Yes,
That's
exactly.
the question you need to ask. Like, oh no, this was a mistake. Really? So one of your employees accidentally wrote Game of Thrones video game by Bethesda
Yeah.
and then listed like this. Okay, maybe
we're-
that happened, right? That's possible. I find that very unlikely. I think that this listing existed for a reason because the game exists, and that when they said, "Oh, we retracted it," that's them saying it wasn't supposed to go up, not them saying it doesn't exist.
Yeah, I mean, you don't see Hannah Montana Ouija boards. They're only making stuff that actually exists.
Exactly, man. Jeez.
I buy that.
Well,
Totally.
So we're not, hey guys, let's summon Satan.
Well, here's my question then. How
Billy Ray Cyrus
would
answers.
how do you think they would even approach making a Game of Thrones video game? Because Game of Thrones, like that entire story, is so much dialogue, political intrigue.
Right, it's
drama.
political. It's not action.
I think
adventure. It's politics.
Yeah, I think that if you think about what the past Elder Scrolls games have been, barring the online one because I haven't touched that, but it's really nebulous. Like your character is somebody important, but really it could be anybody from anywhere. It has never actually mattered.
Right, you could even be an Argonian. You don't even have to be tied down to a specific race.
Right, yeah. So like there's a lot of flexibility in the traditional Elder Scrolls formula, I feel like, to tell kind of any kind of story. And you think of Skyrim, there's a lot of political intrigue still. There's the politics of you have that. There's a scene in the game which I've never experienced. Closest thing is maybe like Chrono Trigger, but sitting down where it's like, hey guys, how are we going to divvy up the land? So-and-so offended so-and-so, and you're kind of like mediating the discussion. Super political, the kind of thing you would totally see, like hashing it out like in Washington, D.C. or something. Like you could just transplant it straight across. I actually think it's not that far-fetched. On a personal note, I would hope that it would not be first person because I think we've, in some ways, run into the limits of that first-person sword play. I would love to see them move to a third person perspective that works, not like the way it worked in Skyrim where it was kind of obviously just put in at the last second. Yeah.
Well, I guess what I wonder. Sorry, go ahead, Dreamcast guy.
Oh, I was going to say, my fear is that Bethesda's kind of got a reputation now of just taking whatever IP and shoving it on top of their existing model. Like even Todd Howard's talking about the fact that he really, really liked Fallout as a series, and when he made Oblivion, he made so much, like millions of dollars. They were like, all right, any franchise you want, we'll just buy it for you and you make that next. And so it's like Fallout, but then he just takes Fallout and shoves it on top of Oblivion. He goes,
yeah, I'm saying that too, because you take the whole point and click nature away from Fallout, and like it's really not the same thing at all. Like at all. That's true. But no, like what I know what you're asking, Mike. Though I believe that they really could tell almost any story set in this world, since we do know that their HBO is apparently prepping a prequel series, a side series.
Yeah.
Be freaking anything if that's in the works, if that's actually true.
So, would you think then that this isn't going to be like the story of these novels or of the television series?
I would say no.
Because I can't see that working from a gameplay perspective. It's like this is like the whole show. I mean, there are battles usually towards the end of the season.
The last
or whatever.
episode of every season.
But it's like traveling around that world. At least up to this point, I haven't watched the current season. I've been waiting to see it with Christine, but. Like up till season 6 or whatever, it's like you can run around the land. The White Walkers haven't like overrun it yet. There's not like enemies everywhere, intermittently to fight and stuff like that. Like what would the game mechanics of a Game of Thrones game be to like
dialogue trees, dude? Just dialogue trees
all day.
Dialogue trees.
Because that's kind of why Telltale approached it in the first place, right? Like it seemed to fit with what they do, which is mostly visual novel kind of stuff with when you kind of make decisions.
Yeah, that would work. Yeah.
Well, okay. So here's the weird thing to consider. Making a Game of Thrones-esque TV series out of any Elder Scrolls episode would be pretty straightforward and obvious, right? Who wouldn't be wondering how that would work? I feel like the formula to Game of Thrones, as we've experienced in a TV show and a book, is one thing. I would believe that maybe they're really operating on the world and then a side story that, like, because we already know their willingness to tell stories that aren't from the books at all. This season being one example of that. But the suggestion that they have a whole other series they're trying to get going could be based on anything.
I feel like it's very likely. I don't know if y'all know the story. When they were making Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, apparently Bethesda, they straight up told Bethesda, like, look, you can either let us write the script of the game and you play like in between movies, or you can just make it like 500,000 years in the past. And they're like, we'll choose option B. So it could very well just be the same thing of like HBO being like, all right, you can take place between seasons and see Tyrion Lannister, or you can take place like back when the war against the Forest Children was existing, which is such a cool time period anyways. So I think it's probably just going to be an ancient past thing.
That would make way more sense to me. And I would actually be a lot more interested if that were the case. Like if it were taking a piece of the lore that hasn't been explored in the novels or in the show at all, so that you don't know what to expect. Like, you don't already know what's going to happen. You don't already know which characters live and die or whatever.
Right.
Like, it's just a totally separate, totally unique thing in some other place in the lore. I think that would be the best way to do it.
I think we would all agree on that we'd rather experience a story other than the one that we experience throughout the show, or whatever is being adapted. However, I do not think that is the general consensus among most people or amongst most of the games that are made. I remember, and recently they've actually changed this, but about 10, 15 years ago, when they first started making Lord of the Rings games, right? I wanted a game that focused more on either the Silmarillion or that focused more on just letting me wander Middle-earth, not necessarily go the literal path of the Fellowship. Yeah, and all the games were that. And there was one that was going to be called Middle-earth Online, which I was stoked for because it seemed like it was going to offer that. And it ended up being called Lord of the Rings Online, and it is. You're following Aragorn and Frodo. And it's like, it's like, gosh dang it. But I know lately there's been Shadows of Mordor and the Angmar one.
War in the North.
War in the North. Yeah. And they've started to branch away a little bit, and I think that's cool. But generally speaking, when a video game is made after existing content, it is following the story of that content. And I don't like that at all. I think they need to stop. But I also think there's something to be said for, hey, we have characters that people care about. We have places and events that people want to experience from a different perspective. And if you scrap all that and redo everything and place it 500 years in the past, and you don't get to take advantage of a lot of the stuff that makes Game of Thrones what it is, you're kind of missing out a little bit.
See, if they go with the current characters, that definitely makes the budget, I mean, it makes it more expensive, right? Because you're either getting voice actors can imitate people everyone knows so
Lord of the Rings games got
like Lord of the Rings, or you get the real people, which are very expensive actors.
Yeah, you can't get the real people. That's out of the question.
Yeah. Well,
but anyway, so I know what we prefer, but the trend has not been that.
We could end up getting something like I don't remember. This is gonna sound like a totally weird example, but do y'all remember the X-Men Origins Wolverine game where it was named after the movie? They cut the trailers like it was going to be based on the movie, but it was actually totally different, and it was awesome. But everybody was super
best
mad
of both worlds there.
Yeah,
they market it as though, and then they switch it.
And so I think they made up, but that ended up pissing a lot of people off because they
didn't switch, dude.
They put the DVD cover. They put like Hugh Jackman on the cover, like, "Hey, buddy, you know that new movie?" And you buy the game, and it's like, "All right, guys, we're going through Vietnam," and they're like, "What the hell?" So they may do that. They may do a thing where it's like Game of Thrones. It's totally Tyrion Lannister. Unfortunately, he's not born yet. Let's go get to that time period.
Yeah, there you go. He's in the after credits scene. That's where you see him. He is in the game.
He's in the DLC, dude.
You have to pay extra.
He's like, I'm a time travel vision. I'm showing up for my paycheck.
You know what's interesting too? This is the last season of Game of Thrones, right?
They have one more after this.
They have one more?
There's one more coming up.
Okay, so if this game exists and it comes out next year probably, or whenever the listing was, I don't know. That's the end of Game of Thrones, right? It is the last part. Yeah. I know you mentioned there's some side
like a side
that's going to be developed.
Before or after, I don't know.
But this game might be following that, which would be interesting. But once you have the full story presented and then you make a game, I don't know. I just see the odds are the game is going to want to follow that story.
Yeah.
They could do it like that super garbage Lost game that takes place during Lost Season 1, and you're this moron who's wandering through the woods being like, "Where do I poop?" And that's the whole game, and it's
some of these
so
games
bad.
Played, dude. I've never even heard of that one.
I didn't know that.
It's called Via Damus, and you literally play through, and you see all the characters, like you see major events of the show, and he's literally in the corner being like, "I'm such an angry journalist," and he's just taking notes. The game sucks.
What? So they put in all the. Oh my gosh! What the crap!
I had no idea that exists. That's crazy.
Jeez.
Well, we'll keep our eye on that. We'll see if Bethesda announces anything here in the next year.
Next
25 years.
Bethesda does their own thing at QuakeCon. I just went to QuakeCon, and that's basically the Bethesda show now. I mean, literally, the whole convention inside was Evil Within. It was Wolfenstein. They had
nice.
Death of the Outsider, and then they had all their VR games.
How was that? Did you enjoy QuakeCon?
Yeah, it was super awesome. I got to meet Shinji Mikami, the freaking maker of Resident Evil. I took a selfie with him. Like, Yeah, so talk about a dream
I saw
come
that
true.
on Twitter. I saw that. Nice, dude.
Man, it was so
That's
big.
freaking
For
awesome.
some reason, I got invited to like this VIP dinner upstairs, and I showed up, and I was the first person there, and it's literally just me and Shinji Mikami in this giant ballroom. And I walk up
Wow.
like, "Hello, may I take a picture?" I was so afraid.
Did they have any demos for
I'm
Wolfenstein?
working. Sorry,
Oh.
my
They have any-
dad, he's trying to walk in. Sorry.
Did they have any demos for Wolfenstein there? Or
Yes, and I liked it. It was like a 30-minute demo for Wolfenstein, and it was really good. My problem, though, is that it is exactly like Wolfenstein that we already had. Like, it controls identically, the levels are set up identically. It's just new jokes. And so it's cool. The scene you're on is you're basically waking up in a wheelchair, and you get a machine gun, like, let's kill these Nazis, and you wheel along. The best scene is you get on, like, a luggage conveyor belt, and you're wheeling along, and there's these two Nazis talking, like, it's so sad that Franz got liquidized by those robots. How am I going to tell his wife? You just get the machine gun. It's really good, but it's also that downside of like there's zero innovation. It's just more levels of the same game
The
we already
same
love.
game again.
Does
man.
does
Yeah.
someone punch a Nazi in the face?
There is a lot of that, yeah.
And
There's
I'm so excited.
Nice.
Speaking
Well-
of Bethesda, though, I gotta mention a little bit more has been shown about like the Switch version of Skyrim,
Right.
and it
right.
appears to be based off of the special edition. People were wondering if it was going to be the 2011 version or not. It appears to be at least be based on the newer version.
Yeah.
And it's running a locked 30, which is what it ran on other consoles.
Yeah.
So I guess that's best note for there.
Good work.
Who's going to buy Skyrim again? Anybody?
I'll see if I can get a review copy because I'm curious about it. But I've bought that game like 7 times now. At this
I know,
point, I
seriously.
think I'm legally cut off.
I cannot bring myself to buy that game again. There's no way.
It took them too long to make it. That thing should have been done earlier.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to our next topic here. Nintendo shutting down Miiverse in Japan on November 8th. Miiverse.
As well as the other the other features I didn't even know were still active, like the chat thing, which we used one time when we got
When
our
we
Wii U
first
into
got
review.
it.
Yeah,
In
and we did a
2011.
chat from the back
Oh, yeah.
of the living room.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
That was the only
Um,
time we ever did that.
I didn't use Miiverse like basically at all, but I know that you used it a lot, Landon. So what
Yeah,
are your
so-
feelings about this?
To be honest, Miiverse is actually part of what made the first Splatoon as awesome as it was. Because, and to me, really, there's only a couple games that made Miiverse work as a concept. One of those is Splatoon. I would say that Super Mario Maker utilized Miiverse really
Oh,
well.
yeah.
There's some
Very
really
well.
funny crap on there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And there were some great Twitter accounts to follow too that would tweet out just dumb things people would say on Miiverse, like the classic "Why can't Metroid crawl?" Like, you know, the beginning of Super Metroid, and there's an area where you need to be a ball to get in, but you haven't found that out yet.
Yeah,
And people are
yeah.
screenshotting there's just a lot of great stuff on there. But
My favorite one will always be, "This game is great. My parents fight a lot." And there's a brownie face.
that's still like Splatoon 2. There's
Yeah.
still people, you know, in the square that are like, my dad forgot me at school or whatever.
Yeah, I love it. Like child abuse memes. Yay.
Oh, right. I know, right?
And
Yeah.
some people who had like hacked the system and could like scan images onto Miiverse and
People
somehow
are still doing that.
like the craziest
Yeah.
looking artwork.
Yeah.
It's like you did not draw that on the game.
I
I challenge you.
now people go pixel by pixel with the D-pad, and you can move one pixel at a time.
Oh, really?
And so if you're patient enough, you can kind of do anything. So it's
That's crazy. Holy crap!
That's-
I didn't know you could do that.
Madness.
I saw a complete, like the first day Splatoon 2 was live, there was this person, like the only person sitting in Inkopolis was a person who'd drawn a picture of Samuel L. Jackson saying, "Did I say squirt?" And it's like, it's like,
Oh,
okay.
dude, there's been some
Miiverse was
great
wonderful.
stuff. What I'm a little upset about, and I understand why they did it, is right now the way that Splatoon 2 is utilizing Splatverse or whatever they're calling that now is they've segregated it. There's like the Japanese one, and then there appears to be the rest of the world. I'm not really sure if there's language specific regions or not, but the Japanese one, there's some awesome, you know, art of like like Gundams and just all this killer stuff,
yeah.
and then for a couple weeks at a time in Splatoon 2, you'll get inundated with memes of everyone saying, "I wish such and such was real," and that's all everyone is saying. I wish, and it's like.
Did you see in Splatoon 2 when there was ketchup versus mayo, and for some reason everybody decided to instead make the fan version of that furries versus non-furries, and someone did this great drawing, and it's this like clearly a little kid's handwriting. It says, "I'm not sure what a furry is, but I like all the cute puppies," and it's a little puppy that goes to the birds.
Yes, dude, and then there's all these people that counter, groups and are like, stop doing this. So you get all these arguments happening. Like the most distant argument you could possibly hold. Like you're not even addressing anyone, just all your people.
It's like having an argument with messages in a bottle when you're on an island. Like, I hope that jerk gets them.
And you just hope that whoever you read their message, you hope they get your message.
Yeah, they're gonna get this, man.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's. I'm glad it lives on in Splatoon 2 because that was where I think it worked. It worked the best. But hours of entertainment.
They'd incorporate the artwork into stages sometimes. You can go around and you'd look and you'd see a Miiverse post on the wall in a game. Yeah.
So well, the way they utilize that for Splatfest is just it makes it feel more alive because you a lot of times playing Splatoon 2 and 1, you're not really talking to anyone, and so partly because Nintendo's made that very difficult to do, and so these posts help keep this vibe going. Like whenever I turn it on and I hop into the square, it's like I run around and see what all the posts are first thing. Like I run up to everyone and see like what are people drawing here, and then I go and play the game. So it's just. I'm glad it still exists. It's sad to see the Wii U services get shut down, but obviously that's a necessity at this point.
So have they said or given any hint of if they're going to replace Miiverse with something similar on the Switch, or like nothing as of yet?
Miiverse was in some ways it was a mistake on Nintendo's part because they created a little island where people who are into Nintendo things could share things with only other people who already like Nintendo things.
Yeah.
So like the power of like Twitter or Facebook is that you can reach people who maybe haven't heard of you already, and so the way it's linked in to where the screenshotting is connected directly to Twitter or Facebook, like in Splatoon 2's version of Miiverse, the only way you can post a picture is if it also gets posted to an actual social media account. So in that way, Nintendo is now utilizing normal social media that everyone else uses, so that you could theoretically be a person scrolling down your feed going, "What the heck's this from?" and then find out about this game.
In order for it to post, I think you need to have a hashtag or something like that, right? Or it automatically puts a hashtag on your post from Miiverse. I think it does.
So I don't think anything's going to replace it other than just what we have now.
Yeah, I don't either.
It would be good, although it would be good if they added a freaking messaging system, so you could message people.
Well, that's the whole thing about the Switch right now, and I talked about this a little bit in the Switch review that we did earlier in the year, like how it feels like it's missing so many features. That's one of the things that really stands out is like you can be friends with people on the Switch, but like what point is there to it? Like you can't communicate with them at all. So like they just know what I'm playing right now. Like big deal. Like. Well, I don't understand what the plan is for that in the future.
Yeah, because right now the only use to being friends with someone is if you're playing Mario Kart or Splatoon. You can hop in or
Yeah, and so I don't know how, but I ended up adding all the big Nintendo YouTubers on my friends list, and so I'll see them in Splatoon. But I hate that I can't just like message them and say, "Do you mind if I join you?" But I also don't want to be that presumptuous guy who's just like, "Hello, Dreamcast guy is here to splat you." So instead, I just never join them ever.
Right. Because Nintendo has made it so awkward.
Yeah,
and that's Nintendo's own awkwardness. Yeah, it's.
Well, how hard would it be to just
forced upon all of us?
How hard would it be just to have at least a messaging system so that you can just send a personal message to somebody?
Well,
and I think if it was just that.
And this goes with Nintendo's paranoia of what if you write a swear word to them and it's a 6-year-old kid and their parent sees it,
The parental control system
really paranoid with that
on the Switch is already actually really robust, so they could really easily have
just filter out
parental control. Well, words or the whole messaging
messages,
system.
period.
Just be like, I don't want my kid sending this.
That would require parents to be familiar with the Switch.
Well, no, because
in
there's an
general,
app, so
right?
they don't even have to touch the Switch to do any of that.
Or to know that they had to download an app ahead of time.
And that's
I guess
true.
it's
That's
just an
true.
extra step. Most parents just buy a game and give it to the kid. They don't know.
I
You know, so
I
it depends
do
on-
foresee Nintendo does like trying to make like hotkeys. Nintendo is really good about hotkeys, so I do imagine that at some point in the next 6 months or a year, we'll end up having a thing where you can click a friend and you'll have 15 options. They're like, "Can I play with you? Great game."
That's
like,
what Mario Kart does,
Mario Kart.
right? Yeah.
I'm using
Yeah,
motion
it's
controls.
race again. Yeah.
I'm using motion controls.
oh, yeah. Have y'all been playing the Dissidia?
Yeah, I was just about to bring that up.
Where
The
you-
way that
yeah.
they do the little bubble messages in that.
Yeah.
it's
So and
same
I love
idea.
to spam. I'm gonna bust that core up. That's my like taunt for people just spamming that. I'm gonna bust that core up, as Titus.
You're saying that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's freaking
It's really
funny.
weird.
Yeah. What do you think of the new Dissidia Dreamcast guy? I haven't done any matchmaking yet. I only had time to do practice because I'm still trying to get used to how different the controls are from the PSP games.
Yeah. I like it. The servers are freaking busted. Like, holy
Really?
crap. There's a weird thing where the game will freeze, but it doesn't tell you why. And so instead of like having just you lag out or just your enemy lag out and letting you just wail on them, it'll be like, oh, we'll just freeze the game for all 6 people. But what's weird is the physics are still working. So you'll literally still see like grass blowing in the breeze and your character's clothes being like, look how epic I am. But you're just
that
standing
must
there
all be
staring
rendered
at each other.
locally then.
Yeah, and it's so weird and so annoying because there are times where you join a game where everybody's kicking each other's butt and then somebody like starts downloading Game of Thrones illegal in the background and all of a sudden everybody just freezes for 5 seconds.
Now the Mayweather
It's like,
and
screw
McGregor
you,
fight. dude.
there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't had too much of an opportunity to play it. I just had basically 30 minutes when I downloaded it the other day free, but it's been so. I haven't even played the PSP Dissidia games in, I want to say 4 or 5 years maybe.
Oh yeah.
But I still have muscle memory connected to that because I played them so much. So
That's
I'm
funny,
still
'cause the
trying
PSP
to.
controller is kind of
Like, I'm
weird.
still trying to lock on with the R button and zoom forward with triangle and attack
Yeah.
with circle and, like, all that stuff. And all the buttons are backwards. It's freaking weird.
They are. If you play through, I like it. Something it does that I haven't seen a game do in a long time. The tutorial is just a movie, and I like that. It just
Yeah.
like in 5 minutes, it goes like hold R1 to dash, R2 and L2 are to switch between left and right targets. Like this is how you do specials. Like triangle is now doing like ranged magic. It was one of those things where within 5 minutes, I went from knowing nothing to like having it mastered. And then I immediately jumped online and was kicking everybody's butt with Squall. So I think
Nice.
the new controls, I think, are actually very, very intuitive, but you really have to play every character to figure out how to counteract them when you go against them.
Yeah, I think it
yeah.
took me like 4 matches before I stopped trying to attack with the wrong button, like
Oh,
the
yeah.
bravery attacks.
Yeah.
But finally, I started getting to where like I wasn't pressing the wrong thing. It took me a while to get my brain rewired to the new controls. The only reason, like, I do agree with you that it's nice that they have a tutorial that you can get through really quickly and just start playing. But I think it's the type of learner that I am. I wish that there was a way to have them say, this is how you do this, and then let me, like, perform it in action. Like, do the thing. Okay, that's what that is. And, like, I seem to remember things better when I have actually had a chance to apply it myself rather than just, like, see it written on the screen. So that I went through that tutorial, and then I went through the game, and I was still doing everything wrong.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I needed to actually have some practical
My
application.
my first match, I got in and I forgot how to dash, how you like turbo
Yeah.
dash towards people, and so everyone's like flying around like Superman, and I'm on the ground being like, guys, I'm trying to play.
Yeah.
That's great.
Anyways, hopefully I'll get a chance to play it a little bit more, maybe this weekend. But I don't know how long the beta is going to run. Do you know? Are they going to keep it open for a while?
I thought it ended already, but then I saw more people
Oh.
streaming it, so I actually clearly I have no idea.
Okay, maybe I better check that soon then, because if they do end it quick and I haven't done any of the matchmaking, that's not a
Yeah,
good thing.
well, it's going to be one of those multi-wave things where they turn the servers on the weekends and then shut it off during the weekdays. I think.
Oh, okay, that's a good idea for them. Okay, let's move on to our viewer suggested topics. Number 1 from Chocolate Rob: what changes would you make to a Final Fantasy VIII remake?
the remake doesn't exist. How can we change it?
If they were to remake it, and this is actually an interesting topic because
This is a very good,
a lot of people who have problems with Final, like, we talk about, like, what is the purpose of a remake, or when does a game need to be remade or whatever. Some people think, oh, leave that game alone, it's perfect the way it is, and other people are like, no, I want to remake. I think the distinction for a lot of people is if there were significant, like, issues with the game, things that were really annoying about it, things that you like wish were different at the time. Yeah. Or, you go back to it and it's like, oh, this is just so antiquated at this point. It would be nice to have it modernized in some way or have quality of life updates in some way. These sorts of questions go through my mind even talking about Secret of Mana Remake. But like you were saying, Kason, if they actually added in the content that they had left out of the original game, like that would be a really cool reason to have a remake, right? But in Final Fantasy VIII's case, there are a lot of people who had issues with game balance, some of the mechanics maybe not being compatible with the leveling system that are in the game, things of that nature. So, I don't know. What do you think, Dreamcast guy? If you were to be in charge of doing the Final Fantasy VIII remake, what changes would you make to the original to improve it?
There's only one thing. Like, I actually am a big Final Fantasy VIII fanboy. I've beaten it several times. There's only one thing I despise, and it's the freaking weapon upgrade system. I hated finding magazines and then a bolt and then this piece of tape. That was the most... It just felt like 15 steps, and there were several playthroughs where I just used the most garbage guns all the way through because I was like, it's not even worth it. I don't even care. I'll be the guy with the dulled sword beating somebody to death with a shovel, basically.
Yeah, that's a good point. Especially for a Final Fantasy game where a lot of times the equipment is like such an essential part of like strategy and stuff like that. And like that game, I almost didn't bother with weapons at all upgrading. It was more just about like junctioning Kiraga spells as quickly as you can and then getting the triples and junctioning that to strength, and then you're good to go. And go ahead.
Well, you go ahead and finish your thought. I have something to add.
I was just going to say that I think what I would do, I think in addition to what you're talking about, Dreamcast guy, with in some way improving the weapon upgrade system, whether that's doing away with it altogether and then having you just have a more traditional weapon system where you buy new weapons. But if they're going to do a weapon upgrade system, somehow revamping that. But in addition to that, I think what I would do is just make sure that really powerful end-game spells cannot be obtained at the beginning of the game. Just make it so that you cannot junction or that you cannot refine the tents into the Kiragas and give yourself 3,000 HP right at the beginning of the game. Make sure that the rewards from playing Triple Triad don't result in refining cards into really powerful spells to where you can break the game's difficulty. A lot of people will disagree with me on that. I understand. I've had this debate with people, and a lot of people say they like it because you can customize your experience and how much difficulty you want there to be. You can make it really hard for yourself. You can make it really easy for yourself. I just I would rather have the game challenge me rather than me challenge myself. And in line with that, I think the other way they could fix that, they could leave that alone. Actually, they could keep that exactly the way it is if they didn't have the level scaling system that they had. So if they changed it to where the enemies don't scale with you, but they are set at certain levels or whatever, then they could keep the junctioning system the same way. Because with the junctioning system, you can make yourself stronger without leveling up. But the enemies have only you leveling up for them to increase in strength. So they rely on you leveling up to get stronger, but you can do it in other ways. So it just makes it really, really easy to, take advantage of that system. And so if they were able to find a way to stop people from taking advantage of that system, I think that's what I would focus on in a remake of FF8. But
what I have to say about this topic is less a change and it's more a lamentation of remakes in general. So the more realistically you treat a game, the less kind of options you have to creatively convey or express a battle taking place. So, Final Fantasy VII is being remade. Awesome. They're doing it this way. Super cool. But don't be surprised if when Final Fantasy VIII gets remade, the battle system is basically the same. Because you're trying to convey, oh, this is what it was really like, right? This is the real interpretation of how the battles went. And here's, Leon Squall, and he's got his sword, and it's all action oriented, right? And the great thing about the games in the 90s and the older RPGs was that you could have a great variance in your battle systems and in your styles and in your strategies and in the way that the protagonists interacted with the antagonists through the course of battle. Whereas when you take the more or less Kingdom Hearts approach to a battle system, and you get your weapon and you go and do what you do, I mean, you're going to have way less variance amongst the action-oriented combat of these remake games than you had back when the original games were first released. And I consider that to be a net negative. I lament that is kind of the direction things seem to be going. Because once you approach it with this realistic style, I mean, you just it will fall into place that things become, the battle system becomes more realistic as well, and eventually you're left with battle systems that all kind of are the same.
Well, in a way that sort of reminds me of when they tried to make a Max Payne movie. They're like, okay, there's this game.
The Mark Wahlberg one, right?
Yeah, so because
I saw that.
Every movie in that genre at the time, they're like, okay, every single psychological crime drama has to follow this exact path. So when it came to make something that actually is different and actually has the psychological path, they're like, nope, sorry, can't have any creativity. We already built the mold. Just shove that in there. There we go. And I feel like they do that a lot with games, too, of being like, well, that's sort of close to this mold. It'll fit.
Well, we're talking about Game of Thrones and the way that Bethesda just is willing to inject some other IP into their little formula. And that's how it works.
That is, I think, the worst movie I've ever seen in my life.
It was pretty bad. I mean,
and
I
I
don't
don't
count
count
the
stuff.
time Constantine came out, right? Constantine was way better.
I don't count stuff like The Room or whatever. Like that's bad in a way that's like so bad it's good, right? But oh man, that Max Payne movie, it's the biggest piece. I was mad when the movie was over. I was mad.
I remember I watched it with you. There is that one scene where Mark Wahlberg bends backwards with his shotgun and he shoots a dude. That was kind of cool. But everything else was so stupid.
I think that was the first movie I watched as an adult after reading a book about film that I was confused about. Where I literally would said, this is how a movie's put together. And then I watched one where it's Mark Wahlberg being like, screw the rules. I'm going to put my head on sideways and shoot ghosts, Valkyrie monsters. I was like, oh, okay, cool. Cinema's dead. Just figured that out. Sweet.
Oh, geez. I love how movies and genres kind of go through a similar. Remember, there's that Jude Law film too, where the angels were coming and he had to kill all the angels.
Yeah.
Oh, Angels,
Demons. The first time.
No, Legion. That's what it was.
Yeah, Legion.
Angels. That came out around the same time as Max Payne too.
It was an
a lot of
thing,
these let's be a half demi quasi spirit world person, but killing angels.
They're like, Jesus sells.
Exactly.
We never got the What Would Jesus Do movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
No.
We did. Have you ever watched the famously bad movie Jesus Christ Vampire Hunter?
No.
It has a very famous scene where at the end of the movie, Jesus skateboards down the street with stakes, stabbing vampires, and he's like, what would Jesus do?
Oh my God. Is that is that where Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter got the title from?
No, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter is a book. I worked at a bookstore for 6 years, so I had to shelf that guy's stuff all the time.
Okay.
Was that the same guy that did Pride and Prejudice?
Yes.
And Zombies?
Yes.
Yeah.
Seth Graham Smith, yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's great.
That's hilarious.
Which they're making a movie. I don't know if it's out yet or not, but they're making a movie of Pride and Prejudice and
Yeah,
Zombies.
that's right.
What would you
Anyways,
do
I don't know how we got on
remade
that topic.
Final Fantasy
Yeah,
VIII,
the realistic treatment of games ends up being pretty uniform, pretty much the same.
So I'll just have to be a Supreme Court justice and recuse myself from this because of conflicts of. I feel like I've never beaten Final Fantasy VIII. I've gotten through or so I was telling somebody it was like a
They
training
were saying it
part,
was right at this point.
and they were saying it was right at this one. That's as far, and I've played it 2 or 3 times. The last time I tried to emulate it on a really crappy laptop because I didn't have access to a PlayStation at the time, and it all ended up crashing. And I was interested in it at the time. I can't remember exactly why, but something about Final Fantasy VIII just never like completely grabbed me. I was when it came out, I was very interested in the game. I was very, very interested in the game, and
didn't
I had a
9
friend.
come out like 1 year later?
It was right on. And I was more interested.
9
I think
grabs
it was
us a little more.
It was a 2 or 3 year gap, I think, because I beat 7 the year that Final Fantasy VIII came out, and then I beat Final Fantasy VIII afterward, and then I think there was like a 2 year gap because I remember I read every single article I could on Final Fantasy IX, and I remember being so intrigued by the weird art style, like because
it's different, isn't it? Yeah.
They were showing all these. They were showing like the early translation. All the game magazines were given like these like 7 screenshots, and they even said like this is a rough translation. And I remember just like, oh my god, this character's name is Sid. Oh.
Looks like 8 was released in
99,
February '99.
And then 2000.
And then Final Fantasy IX was July 7th, 2000. So
That's
a little
crazy.
over a year and a half, something like that.
I think the reason I've always liked 8 a lot is its super heavy military focus. It always felt like no other game in the series really did it, of like the fact that you literally get a soldier's pay and you take written exams to rank up and you're actually doing an assassination mission. Like that for some reason really clicked with me as such an interesting, like different view, despite all the bad graphics and stuff and the weird plot holes with everybody forgetting that they're actually like best friends from childhood. I just like that.
That is a more unique environment. I like that too.
The thing about 8 is like, go ahead, Landon.
I was gonna say someday I might finish it, but it's just not that high on my list. And I've taken a couple cracks at it, and I kind of have a thing with some games where it's like if I took a few cracks at it, there's just so many other games that I just haven't gotten around to that I'm almost the type of person to be like, I'm just gonna move on to the next thing. So I may play 8 at some point in the future. If there's a remake, I don't know, because I'm not as big on playing games that are remade and I never played the original. You know, I usually want to go and play the original, even when it's almost only a cosmetic refresh. I'm just kind of like, what did they actually release at the time? But I had friends when the game came out that were so into it. Like this one friend of mine in high school at the time, he all the way through as he played it, because like we were in PE together, and so he did this with Final Fantasy VII as well before I had actually beaten that game. And so he'd say, okay, this is what I did, this is what happened, and then so this guy talked to this guy, and then this thing happened, and he would tell me what happened in his battles and stuff. So like I experienced it vicariously through him a little bit. But yeah, I don't feel like I can have any opinion on this at all, so recuse myself.
Nice.
Always wanted, instead of a remake, I've always said I wanted a Final Fantasy VIII prequel, because they talk so much about the Sorceress Wars that basically destroyed the world and killed every freaking adult, basically. I've always wanted to see that, and it's one of the worlds that has the most vibrant backstories that we don't even get a flashback of.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, that's actually kind of what I wished they had done with Final Fantasy VII. Instead of making stories that came after the game, it didn't make any sense. Like the end of the game was left very open-ended like that on purpose, like because it was like, oh, did humanity survive? Like what happened? The whole city's overrun, and it was like, you don't get that closure, but that wasn't the point. The point was that they saved the planet, right? That was what they were after anyways. And so I wish they had gone back to when like Genova had actually freaking invaded, like at the time of the Ancients.
Oh, wow.
Told, like, that's
back.
That would have been a cool story, I think, to explore in Final Fantasy VII's world.
Still would be.
And then it could be a point-and-click adventure, like Game of Thrones. We'll actually have to figure out who among us is the shapeshifter. I'm totally on board.
There you go. You got it.
Absolutely. Nice.
Freaking million the first day. Million sales. Okay, next question is from Jarvis Mott. He asks, are games capable of expressing a main narrative conflict as man versus self? Do you know any games that are examples of man versus self? Closest I can think of is Hellblade, and even with that, the internal struggles with Senua's psychosis wasn't the main conflict. So, I'll say first, actually, that I disagree with that. Without spoiling the game, because everyone should play this game, I think that is actually the central conflict of the story of Hellblade is Senua's psychosis, the acceptance of what has happened, what she's dealing with, is all at the center of what that game's really what it's all about. I mean, like it's kind of clothed in all of this Norse mythology. But yeah, I mean, that's a really great example. I think recently, one of the better examples I've ever seen. But I think that a lot of games in like the horror genre, like Silent Hill 2 or Eternal Darkness, do a really good job with the whole.
See, I was thinking that. I think I know where you're going with that, but I also kind of disagree and would side with Jarvis a little. Now, I didn't play Hellblade, but I think when you're talking about like the main conflict, maybe that wasn't the right wording from Jarvis, because like clearly, like thematically, the main like thematic conflict was an internal struggle. But what did you do in the game? Like what was the mode? What was the mechanism for that game? Were you going around and fighting other people, or were you fighting yourself? And even with Eternal Darkness and with the other games that you mentioned, you are externally focused. You are fighting other things. And even though the story, and maybe like you said, Mike, the main conflict, which is true, the main conflict, even though it is internally focused, the game you are playing, the things you are doing, the mode and the mechanism of the entire game is outward focus. You are fighting things outside of yourself.
Except for Dark Link. Did you fight Dark Link?
But even then, it's like he's supposed to be you, but you, what are you doing? It's you fighting another like person, physically fighting. Like physically, he has a sword, you have a sword.
They have to have a physical battle representation.
Like if you think of a book that's man versus self, that doesn't exist.
It's true.
You think of a movie, or you think of any other story that's man versus self. It's not some dude going around fighting a bunch of things.
Right.
I would say maybe like Catherine could fit into that, because that's a lot of him. But even still, I mean, you're climbing blocks and solving puzzles.
The puzzle climbing.
So
puzzles,
if that's
it would be puzzle games, those are the most man versus self. Nancy Drew is man versus self.
Yeah.
If that's the intent of Jarvis Mott's question, I don't know how you would even do that, to be honest. Like,
I think that's
I've got. Can I spoil a game from 2002? A Silent Hill spinoff, Shattered Memories.
Shattered Memories. I played that. That's another game I was going to bring up, but yeah.
Okay, so when you first turn on Shattered Memories, you actually take a series of psychological questions that ends up building the game around you. Literally, some of the boss fights and some of the encounters are determined by your own psychological evaluation. And so, playing through the game, you cannot fight off any monsters. You're just solving puzzles and running from monsters. And the whole thing is you trying to literally unpack what you think is saving your father, and it really is more about the fact that your father's dead and you're trying to deal with his loss. And the whole thing at the end is you're just sitting in a psychologist's office. And so I think that's a good example of a visual representation of unpacking the horrors of Silent Hill as a man versus self.
You know, the other thing that comes to mind for me is Dear Esther, where it's not, and that might be a little spoilery for Dear Esther, but it's not immediately obvious what you're doing at all. And in some layers, you're not doing anything. You're just walking.
Right.
But as you walk along, you get kind of almost Bioshock style. You get the audio logs that'll explain crap to you. And so in that sense, it leans more towards literature, because that could have kind of worked as a book. You could have described these locations and then just had them written out. And I do think this is a conflict that is very difficult to externalize as a video game, because it's so inherently internal. And video games need to have a thing to interact with. You need interaction, and interaction with yourself is really abstract. And video games are very, very bad.
I'm sure
it's a
there's
very
a
bad
way to
medium
do
for
it.
portraying abstract concepts.
Those articles written about ludonarrative dissonance, where you have a point and you have an objective, but you have to go way over here to prove it. Of like, the whole point of Bioshock is I'm a man discovering that I'm a slave. Like, obviously, I love it so much I have the tattoos. And how are we going to solve that? Shooting underwater zombies.
Yeah, the Bioshock games have always struggled with that. And that's actually, I didn't even bring up Bioshock as an example of this specifically, but on some level it does work that way.
Yeah.
But again, if it fails, because it's 99% man versus man versus nature.
Other things.
Yeah.
Well, bringing
Silent
back
Hill game,
up,
you mentioned Dreamcast. It may be that you're not physically fighting these monsters, but it is a struggle, you against the monsters, not that are physically manifest, that are actually in the space, not just you and yourself.
There's an extra layer to Shattered Memories in particular, though, and that is that the game psych profiles you not just in the sections where you take the tests, but also in the way that you explore the world, in the way that you interact with things, like what you pay attention to, what you look at, who you call. Like, it generates a profile for you just based on like what you pay attention to as you're exploring.
That's a thing games can do that no other medium can do.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the closest example I've ever seen in a game of this kind of thing, because it's not based on you escaping from an enemy. It's based on what you internally focus on, like what choices that you make in the way that you just even look at the environment, like what you pay attention to, what you look at, like where you decide to go.
So in that sense, it's even different from man versus self, because it's man versus self in a book or a movie or in any other format. It's the man of the story, or woman. I know this is terribly sexist for us to be calling it man versus self, but we'll just continue that. It's the man or woman of the story battling against the man or woman themselves in the story. But what you're talking about here with the video game is the man or woman of the story battling against you, the player. And that almost gives you a whole different man versus self. Isn't supposed to be like you, like as a passive participant. It's man versus player.
You're not that guy. You didn't have that.
Man as the mode of the story, the character, versus the player as an active participant. And so there's two people.
You're another character apart.
It's that's just weird. There is no characterization. There is no man versus what for that type of story.
I feel like the closest
man versus
the closest we'll probably ever come is stuff like Gone Home, where it's you battling against your expectations of what your sibling is supposed to be, and as you follow this trail of clues, you unpack what they actually are, and at the end, you're really having to decide, like, did you fail? Did this person fail? Like, that's a man versus self situation,
right.
But, that's the closest I can think of.
Yeah, well, the Stanley Parable, very, very similar in that same sense, where it's like, what's going on here, and the illusion of choice. But then that's really more about the illusion of choice, not as much man versus self, but it's framed as like, and then depending on some things, your guy has a mental breakdown, and it is Stanley, and they're always referring to Stanley, and then Stanley having this whole, I don't want to spoil too much, people probably all played it, but you know what I'm saying.
Does Stanley have a parable?
No, I'm sorry, not Stanley Parable.
Does that happen?
No, it is Stanley Parable. Yeah.
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 I have not played Stanley Parable. It's been in my freaking
good.
Steam account for like a million years, and I've never even installed it.
I wrote about it on my top 10 short games video, just since I basically found the best games you could beat in like 4 hours, and that one you can pretty much clear in about 90 minutes.
Yeah, it's extremely short.
I should freaking do it then.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I say Final Fantasy VII when Cloud's in his own head. There you go.
Yeah.
We got Cloud, and then Cloud, and then the Cloud, and then Cloud.
I Cloud.
It's like, what's going on?
That's right.
Exactly. Yeah, that's something they were trying to explore there. Cloud versus Cloud.
What other games have explored Cloud versus Cloud? That's what I want.
That's the genre I want to find.
New distinction, Cloud versus Cloud. Okay, last question. This one is directed at you, Dreamcast guy.
DCG.
How do you go about reviewing games? Do you think it's necessary to complete every game you review, or is it enough just to get a feeling for the game? I'm a reviewer for a Danish site, and sometimes there is simply not enough time to see the game I'm reviewing all the way through. Is that also the case for a YouTuber who reviews a lot of games, but who doesn't need to hit the embargo like me?
I think you absolutely have to beat a game to fully understand it. I think there's only been 2 games ever that I haven't finished before reviewing, and it's because the game literally broke itself. One of them was Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5. I got all the way to the last level of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5, and loading the last level, and right as it was kicking on the autosave, the game hard crashed and deleted my save file, so I give it a 2 out of 10. So other than those exceptions, luckily I had footage of it. I have footage, and it had the happiest loading screen of this guy doing like a kickflip, like, hey bro, your whole day's ruined, I think it's necessary to beat. I think part of my method of doing it, because I review a lot of games, is the advantage I have is that I was trying to set world record speed runs for a long time. I used to speed run everything. If you actually go to my YouTube channel and just type in speed run in the search bar, you'll actually see the first things I ever really put up was speed runs. In fact, I beat BioShock Infinite in 6 hours because I just found out that you could glitch out talking scenes and just run past them. And so there's times this person's like, the reason I killed your mother in the past, and I'm like running out of the room.
Yeah.
So
That's hilarious.
Since I've done that so much, I really have built up this like system of patterns in my head where as soon as I pick up a game, I can innately figure out what the general flow is going to be, what the loop will be, and I can analyze it a lot easier and faster. And typically my process is I usually beat the game in 2 sittings. I usually beat it Saturday night and Sunday night, and then I write my script Monday morning, record the audio, chop it all together, and then post it on Tuesday.
What about really, really large RPGs, though, like games that are 50 to 100 hours long? How do you handle that?
Those are the harder ones, but at least they send that to me a lot easier. Like one that was pretty long recently is Yakuza Kiwami. Like that one took me a bit.
Yeah.
That one was good. It's such a good game. But the hard part was, while the main story is only about 30 hours long, so it's pretty easy to knock out, there's a lot of side quests, and there's a lot of mini games, and each time you go and see a mini game for the first time, typically there's a side quest that you have to sit through, like, oh man, I want to be the best car racer of all, but unfortunately my wife left me. Like, oh my, come on. So that one takes a lot of hours, but it's just a matter of sectioning out. Typically, my thing is I schedule things very, very strictly. My grandfather was like a giant businessman who founded this like billion-dollar company. And one piece of advice he always gave me is like clock in at 6 a.m., but always clock out at 6 p.m. That was like a rule he said, is like if you actually section out like 12 hours of the day to write scripts, record audio, and edit stuff, you'll get more done than if you just say this whole day. So I've gotten very efficient about like waking up early and just putting 12 hours into a game and accidentally making like 20 hours of progress.
Nice.
Dang. So how do you juggle, like you mentioned with BioShock, like blowing through cutscenes and glitching out the game? How do you like juggle getting a real feel for the game and for its pace and for, I guess, the product that the director meant to put out? When you go through it so quickly.
Well, see, luckily I don't do stuff like that as much when I'm speedrunning a game. Of course, you're literally counting frames. Like I set a world record in Resident Evil 2, and you're literally counting the number of steps before you do a kick turn. Instead, when I'm reviewing something like Uncharted: The Lost Legacy, that game's only about 7 hours long if you're just really blowing through it. And so it's just a matter of getting in there, solving puzzles, analyzing all the cutscenes, really taking notes of, okay, does this emotional impact make sense? So it's just kind of a matter of there's a book I like called Old Man's War by John Scalzi, and there's these people who have been made in tanks. They literally are like superhumans who are just grown, and they describe that they don't communicate via language, they communicate via thought. And so because of it, they like just shoot a full blast idea at you, and they describe it as like you're opening up your mouth to take a drink and it's a fire hose. I feel like I've trained my brain to analyze video games like that. I'm just taking it everything like a fire hose at all times. And so because of it, I can break it down more easily into scripts and how's this combat working, and let's really go in depth as to how this level up mechanic functions and is it breakable.
Nice. Cool. So, how many games are you playing at once for review? Do you just focus on one, or do you have like multiple reviews going on at once?
One at a time. I'd say 4 or 5 times a year I have to do like 2 at once. Like, so it was really weird that last week I had to do Uncharted: The Lost Legacy and finish up Yakuza Kiwami at the same time. And so what I ended up doing is I beat the main story of Yakuza Kiwami. I went to a convention, and then I came back from the convention and like beat all of Uncharted, wrote the script for Uncharted, and then did the side quests for Yakuza Kiwami, and then like wrote the script for that, and then just basically edited, but like then basically edited the script with a clean frame of mind after beating the other game type of thing. So it's very rare that I have to juggle things like that. Typically, it's a lot easier for me to just like sit down, spend 30 or 40 hours in the week, and completely knock something out.
How do you go about selecting which games you're going to review? Do you have like I just like these kinds of genres, so I'll stick to games in those, or are you more interested in like what's going to be like in the news or whatever? It's
everything. It's a lot of stuff. I of course, I've done reviews that nobody watched, like Nex Machina, which I consider one of the best games of the year. I think that review got 4,000 views. But then a lot of times I just pick via passion. Like, I am a huge Friday the 13th fan. I've actually even read the Friday the 13th comics. So when I heard they were doing a game, I wanted to, of course, review it. So I contacted the publisher, I got the game early, and I managed to put up a video like talking about how it is so fun, and despite all its glitches, it has such a vibrant community that really, really celebrates the games and movies and everything in one. And so because of it, that video ended up blowing up because I put all this passion and a unique direction to it. So it's kind of a mix, but I feel like if anybody's trying to make it as a reviewer, pick via passion. Some of my first videos that really blew up was I was reviewing the DLC specifically for Evil Within, which is on my shelf behind me, because I just love that game so much. And so since nobody else was talking about the DLC of a horror game that flopped 6 months ago, all those videos ended up getting 5,000 or 6,000 views, which when I was at 3,000 subscribers was an enormous amount of traffic.
Yeah. So one more. Sorry, I keep berating you with questions here.
No. This is my job, and I love my job. I like talking about the nitty gritty technical, because I never get to talk about the technical stuff. You know.
Well, I just wonder, like, if you ever feel like, oh, I didn't have as much time as I would have liked to have explored that a little bit more, or explained this in more detail, because the game comes out on this date, and I want to have my review up. Right? At a certain time.
I've never had that. I sometimes feel unsatisfied with my. There's times where if you accidentally end up reviewing like 3 RPGs in a 6 weeks period, I sometimes have this unsatisfied feeling where I didn't have enough word variation. Like, I have professional grievances with my own work sometimes, but I never ever feel unsatisfied with the progress I made in a game. Usually they give me a game so freaking early, like Sega gave me that, Valkyria Revolution, like a full month early. And while that game is about 25 hours long, it's almost all cutscenes. So it's just a matter of sitting there with my capture card turned on, being like, yep, your dad also betrayed you. That's cool. So it's just a matter. So I'm never unsatisfied with the amount of game I beat. I'm able to beat every game and have enough time for it to sink in. It's just sometimes I feel unsatisfied with my own performance making a video.
Yeah. I would say that in the past, like, we got Star Fox early enough, I think, to have had plenty of time to review that one, where I felt really comfortable to, But with, like, Breath of the Wild, we got it a couple days later than most people did, I think. Mm-hmm. It came on a Friday instead of on a Wednesday. I think it's when everyone else got theirs.
Yeah,
and so we were trying to beat that over the
9
weekend.
or 10 days before the embargo date. Yeah.
And just, like, could not get through enough of that in order to do, like, a full review.
I feel like I get most of about 3 weeks early. Like, I just got Metroid Samus Returns. So I have about 3 weeks to do that. So it's just a matter of, like, I don't know. But I also feel like part of that's just on the business side of things. I talk to companies really far out. A lot of times I tell them 4 or 6 weeks out, like, hello, I'm Dreamcast guy. I've got 70,000 subscribers. I average over 1 million views a month. I specialize in review style format. And they're usually pretty quick about being like, oh, hello. Okay, well, here's the game.
So they'll get it to you with plenty of time.
Yeah.
Cool. That's good. Well, that wraps it up for us today. That's all of our topics.
I actually have one more thing. Yeah, before we wrap up today, I had one more thing I wanted to add just at the end. I just want to really encourage everyone listening, everyone watching right now, with the stuff that's going on in Houston with Hurricane Harvey. Find a way that is within your means to potentially donate to, be it the Red Cross or whatever, but find a way in your own sphere of influence to contribute or help the rescue efforts that are going on over there right now. That's an ongoing situation. It's still, rivers are like supposed, as you guys hear this is when rivers are actually supposed to be cresting. So the situation is really, really pretty bad as you've seen the past few days. You're now hearing it at its worst point. So I would just encourage everyone to really reach out.
A lot of my friends are trapped down there right now, and they can't even leave. So many people tried to evacuate originally. They ended up clogging up the road. So there are a lot of people
they couldn't get out.
So some of my friends right now are literally, my friend Leah right now is in an apartment, and the entire bottom floor is flooded, but they still have water and power, and so they just have to hope their car doesn't wash away. And they're literally every day they're seeing trucks bringing in boats, and then those boats coming back full of people. So I mean, any cent you donate right now is literally to give people food, power, and water.
My sister-in-law just had to get rescued by the Coast Guard yesterday, and my mother-in-law is stranded in the middle of Houston. She's a paramedic, and she actually specializes in underwater rescue, and so she has been around the clock. She's been stuck in downtown Houston since Sunday. And actually, my wife's parents, they just barely sold a house last year. That house is underwater, so it's insane. I mean, having been there and just being like, and seeing pictures, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is on a whole nother scale. So a lot of you might not be from the United States or somewhere where this, but I would just encourage everyone to at least give it a thought. Look into contributing in some fashion. I think that would be very, very awesome.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Okay, guys, thank you, Dreamcast Guy, for joining us today on our podcast.
It was my pleasure.
Dreamcast Guy's YouTube channel and give him a subscribe. He does really good quality work, video game reviews, plus like top 10 lists. Anyone?
Well, follow Dreamcast Guy on Twitter too, because honestly, the people I follow on Twitter, he's one of the more entertaining people.
I try and tweet out the spiciest of memes and the hottest of takes.
You got the dankest memes.
Have your mittens on if you go to follow him.
Exactly.
What is exactly your schedule? You do one review a week, a top 10 list, and a rant, so 3 videos a week? Is that
lately I've been doing 2 rants and a review, so it basically comes out to 4 to 5 videos a week now, and I mean, people are loving it. I mean, the traffic is crazy. I mean, I'm getting averaging about 35,000 views a day now, which is just like crazy.
Great. Good work.
That's awesome. So yeah, go check out his channel. Link will be in the description, but it's very easy to search as well. Dreamcast Guy. Can't miss it. All right, everybody. We will see you again next time. Thanks for watching. Peace out.
Yeah.